To continue our verbal history of the life of Antony Bashir, which will continue more and more as we go along. But during his time, he had to create a system of governance, which he modeled, of course, after the Protestant model of Board of Trustees. Now, that worked for a while, until Sayyidina Philip changed it to parish councils. However, it was both good and bad, because the Board of Trustees, many of them felt that they were sitting on the board of General Motors, or they didn't have any other place to go, so they used the church to get up and yell at everybody, especially the priests. I heard about one priest in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, that he would make coffee for the Board of Trustees, serve them coffee, and leave. He never attended a meeting. So they could be very contentious. And I experienced in my town of Syracuse, they were tough years. People getting used to young clergy, and some of them converts. And for some reason, the convert priest got away with more things than an Arab priest. All the Sittos loved that white boy. And they would fill him up with Arabic food like crazy, whoever it may be. But a lot of what Sayyidina Bashir implemented, the seeds of which came from Eftimis Ofesh, who later got married. He had these seminal ideas about the unity of church, the Orthodox Church in America, and so on and so forth, and using English, and writing the first Sunday school books, the Gelsinger books, that no one even knows about anymore. There was a coterie of priests there was a priest, his name was Father Stephen Upson, who was a good friend of Father Paul Schnerle, who was a priest of Brooklyn and the secretary to the Archbishop. The red book that we've used, I mean, the guy was a scholar, a Greek scholar. And he would be running his family business, and he would be translating. He and his wife translated and wrote all of our early the new Sunday school material. Our prayer book, the red prayer book, the little book the pocket book that you have. He translated that. What Sayyidina Bashir did, he turned intelligent men to work for him. He had these goals, He knew what he wanted to do. He was unbending. He had an unbending will to achieve. And by his persona, he held this archdiocese together. Would there be other incursions from other places, as they were in those days? The Archdiocese of Toledo was relatively small, but in comparison to the New York Archdiocese. And they later united with us, as we'll tell later. But he was a towering figure. And again, I repeat, our youth movements, our college campus movements, and so many of the organizations that later Saint and Philip developed, many of them, not all of them, but many of them came from the seeds that Anthony Bashir planted in North America. If I would charge any one of you to find the word magazines that go way back and read his charges that he gave to the Archdiocese Convention. And also, more important, the compassion and love he had for his priests. He loved them. He protected them. When I was doing research on this book in the early years, I used to go to the attic of the Archdiocese and go through all the letters. And I picked up a letter, and he used to do a funny thing. If you wrote him a letter, he would write back on that same piece of paper his response sometimes, just to save money. People thought that he was, not generous. But let me tell you something. He was like our sittos and our jiddos, our grandparents, our yayas, who saved every penny so the next generation will live better than them. And just before he died, he laid the foundation for St. John of Damascus Theological School in the Belaman with the monies that he accrued during his lifetime. And I believe he had pledged $250,000 toward that's no mean money in those days. And Philip fulfilled that pledge. And they were about ready to find a new chancery. I mean, he was a man on the move. He knew instinctively that he had to save so the new generation would not suffer what his generation suffered in their poverty. Of course, you would never know it when you saw him. He was extremely dignified, well-groomed, well-dressed. And I started to tell you about the letter. I dug up a letter where a priest was seen going into some establishment he shouldn't have been. And somebody wrote a complaint to the Archbishop. The Archbishop wrote back on that letter. Honestly, I cried when I read it. He wrote on that letter, "Honey, please do not do this again. The people want to love you. And if you do such things, you will have a very difficult time in this parish. So promise me, honey, you will not do this again." I mean, who would write such a letter without admonishing him and hitting him on the head because he had a complaint? That meant the man had a large heart. a large heart for his priest. And because of that, the lay people, the young people, fell in line. And as I said, you can't believe how flourishing the choirs in Soyo and the religious education and the relationships that we had with all Orthodox jurisdictions. It was the most thrilling period in North American life. Athenagoras was succeeded by Yaakovos, and both Archbishop Yaakovos, God bless his soul, and Metropolitan Antony worked together as a team to build an Orthodox church in America. And I'm sure you saw Yaakovos walking hand in hand with King in his march in Alabama. And you would see Antony Bashir opening up the Senate, going to the White House, offering prayers in the House of Representatives to show the American Orthodox people and to America at large that we have arrived and we can no longer be the best kept secret. God bless this towering figure. I just have to make a quick correction. Athenagoras was followed by Archbishop Michael, who later was followed by Archbishop Yaakovos. And when Sayyidina Antony went to Portland, it was for the Episcopal National Conference in Portland. But in general, he traveled to many. He had good ecumenical instincts, and he quipped all the time regarding John the 23rd, saying that he was sent by God to bring unity to the church. But one time he was called and said, he was asked about the call of unity. Bashir quickly quipped that, he said, why don't they just join the Orthodox Church and there'll be no more disunity? But he just had an ecumenical sense. One time I was with him in Altoona, Pennsylvania. We were talking about money, and someone said to him during a Q&A, he said, how much money do you have? They were always asking, how much money do you have? So the Archbishop picked up and told the man, please stand up. And the man stood up, and he pulled out a black book from his pocket. And he kept thumbing through that book for maybe 10 minutes while the man stood there sweating. He says, young man, I don't say you made any contribution to this archdiocese, and you're asking how much money do we have? Please, sit down and be quiet. He said, the young man said, but I give you ideas. And Bashir quickly said, ideas? I have given the world ideas. Please sit down. In another time at the Toronto Archdiocese Convention, again, this is where the ladies sort of thing kind of rumbled a lot. So someone got up and told him that he was not adhering to Robert Rules of Order. And he wouldn't shut up. He kept on standing up, interrupting and protesting. You're not following Robert Rules of Order. And you're not following the Constitution. Bashir very quickly picked up the Constitution that was sitting on the table next to him. He says, Constitution, I am the Constitution. Rip! And he ripped the Constitution in two. He said, now challenge me. He had, and even, you may have felt it was a little bit rough, but he's charmed. The people stood up and they cheered him because they did not want to see the Archbishop challenged by some intellectual midget. And these are stories, man, that made our church great. I hope you enjoy them as we go along. God bless you.